Where are the registration papers? Do you have the keys? This car looks far too expensive. You lying hag. How could an old black woman like you possibly afford something this pricey?" Officer Keller roared in the middle of Ridgepoint's street. Eleanor Graves stayed silent, held out the key, yet was still handcuffed like a thief. The crowd watched, unaware that the humiliated woman was a federal judge. "Which state do you live in? Have you ever met an overbearing officer, like Keller, where you live?" Afternoon in downtown Ridgepoint wore a light veil of mist. Sunlight seemed strangled by the gray clouds above. Foot traffic was sparse, and most people were hurrying to finish their day. The air felt thick, as if the city were holding its breath for something about to erupt. Eleanor Graves stepped out of the corner cafe with measured steps. Her gaze stopped on the white Bentley parked quietly at the curb, so spotless it mirrored the sagging sky. She wore a white blouse, her coat folded over one arm, elegant yet unpretentious. In her 60s, Eleanor still carried a sharp, commanding presence, something people sensed without any introduction. Micah Sanders followed close behind, his voice soft yet firm. "I'll send the entire file to Senator Carla. They won't be able to ignore it anymore." Eleanor did not reply at once. She eyed the road ahead, a muted sigh catching in her throat. "Watch out for those who carry guns but leave their brains behind," she said, eyes still on the car. "Do you think anyone will stay quiet when the system's last piece is flipped over?" Micah gave a dry smile, but fire flashed in his eyes. "If not now, then never." She nodded slightly. No spoken farewell was needed. Eleanor moved to open the car door. Just then, a cold shout rang out behind them. "Stop! Whose car is that? You think you can just touch it?" Micah jerked around. From across the street, a police officer strode toward them. White, about 40, towel with L, with close-cropped hair. The badge on his left chest gleamed. His right hand rested loosely on the holster, a reflex. Eleanor turned, calm. She had not yet spoken when the officer closed in, his gaze sweeping her from head to toe as if appraising property. "Papers? Do you have the key? This car looks far too expensive." "Liar, how could someone like you afford a car like this?" Without answering, Eleanor produced the smart key and held it out. Her hand did not tremble, yet her gaze turned icy. Micah grimaced and half-stepped forward. "Officer?" Back off," the man barked, louder and sharper. He shoved Micah aside. "Stay out of this. The vehicle is suspected of theft." Micah nearly fell. He meant to say more, but Eleanor's subtle gesture, "Don't," stopped him. Her face remained unreadable, but her eyes hardened. No one else intervened. Cars rolled on. A few pedestrians paused, then hurried along as though witnessing something tediously familiar. Only one thing was unfamiliar, the uncanny silence of the woman being accused. Keller tightened his grip on the holster, eyes locked on Eleanor. A beat of silence passed. The whole street muted. Then he ordered, voice low yet clear, "Turn around." Eleanor did not move. She stared at him, her gaze a wordless challenge. Keller did not wait. He stepped in, yanked her arms back with practiced motion. The cuffs snapped shut with a cold metallic click. She did not resist, her face set hard as stone. No explanation, no protest. Micah shouted from the opposite curb, furious. "You're arresting a federal judge!" The words evaporated into the open air. No one reacted. A middle-aged woman across the sidewalk stopped, rummaged for her phone and began recording. A teenager behind her streamed it live, eyes wide with curiosity. People began to gather. None intervened. All observed. A quiet question escaped. What did she do wrong? No one answered. No one dared. A blond boy of about 12 tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering, "I think I saw her on TV." The mother bent down, placed a hand on his shoulder, told him to hush, her eyes flicking to the officer, still gripping the woman. Eleanor stood beside the shining white Bentley, wrists locked behind her, hair in a neat bun, white blouse fitted to her frame, her gaze ice-cold, a picture violently at odds with what people are taught a street criminal looks like. She showed no weakness, not a hint of fear. Keller's face stayed blank as he scanned the crowd, staging a display of power. He stood tall, tone steady, radioed for backup. No apology, no explanation. Micah stepped back, blocked by another officer who had just arrived. He raised his phone, dialed, his voice choking while speaking to the federal judge's chambers, fighting to stay calm as he watched his former mentor being treated like a criminal. No one in the crowd knew who the woman was. No one asked. They watched, recorded, and posted online. Not for justice, but for novelty. Eleanor said nothing. She looked down at the paving stones, then up at the darkening sky, as though counting the minutes before truth was spoken aloud. She needed no title to know where she stood in the system's eyes, and she understood that here the right to respect rests not in office, but in the hands of those who give orders and those who merely watch. Eleanor sat in the back seat of the patrol car, her hand still cuffed behind her, spine straight, head unbowed. Her gaze stayed on the window, quietly observing each scene flashing past. No one on the street knew the woman in the car was a federal judge, nor did they know that her silence now was the first step toward something much larger. Micah was kept outside, phone pressed to his ear, repeating her name to the person on the line. Eleanor Graves. She is a federal judge. I need to speak to whoever is in charge right now. The other end remained on hold. No one picked up. No one moved in time. The car turned onto the internal road leading to Ridgepoint Police Headquarters. Keller sat in front, never looking back, yet his eyes occasionally met Eleanor's in the rear-view mirror. There was unmistakable delight in that look, as if he were savoring a silent victory. Quite fitting, Keller said, his voice low but clear. A Bentley and a pair of cuffs. Not too bad, is it? Eleanor gave no answer. No movement. The silence made him glance back again. Still no reaction from the woman in custody. When the vehicle stopped, Eleanor stepped out, her pace slow, showing not a trace of disquiet. On the walk inside, curious eyes slid over her, yet no one spoke. A white man in plain clothes nodded at Keller, then turned away as though nothing had happened. None of this surprised Eleanor. Long ago she had understood that the day she truly pressed the system's limits, it would react like a wounded body. A system's first reflex is to protect itself, facts be damned, evidence unnecessary, so long as mouths stay shut and force prevails. She could have flashed her badge. She could have made a single call to end it all. She chose not to. Eleanor would not interrupt this performance. She wanted to see how many people would aid an obvious wrong, simply because they did not know who she was. How many would assume that a black woman behind the wheel of a Bentley was suspicious. How many would keep silent, though they knew it was wrong, bowing to convenience. She was not testing herself, she was testing the entire system. They brought her to the holding room, a narrow corridor with 2 rows of waiting benches and a 2-ways observation window. Keller said nothing more, handed her to the duty team, and left. A young female officer emerged from the records office, papers in hand, lingering a second too long at the glass. Hesitation flickered in her eyes. Eleanor M. Graves. Her name lay in the report like a scratch on clean paper. The officer tightened her grip on the file, looked up as if to speak, then pressed her lips together and went back inside. Eleanor saw it all, yet remained seated. She did not need to speak, not yet. Inside her, every small act was being recorded, not for revenge, but to learn who was who in a game of justice that had never been fair. Isabel Lopez sat at the afternoon duty desk, eyes on the internal surveillance monitors. The shift was usually quiet, but since Eleanor Graves had been led into holding, the station's atmosphere had changed. Footage from the fixed corridor cameras showed every detail. A black woman, calm stride, hands cuffed behind her, walking between 2 escorting officers. Lopez paid scant attention until the detainee's name appeared in the electronic file form. The words froze her. Eleanor M. Graves. A name more familiar than any other in her life. At 14, she had sat outside the courtroom listening to this woman deliver the final sentence against her father. A strange, painful trial. Her father, a state trooper, was prosecuted for excessive force, resulting in death. One of the rare cases the system did not bury. She had hated that judge. Hated her enough to burn. Yet, as she grew, as she joined the force, She began to grasp what her father had never admitted, the truth. Lopez rose and walked to the corridor where the observation glass separated holding from the monitoring room. Inside, Eleanor sat, eyes fixed on the void ahead, motionless, expression unchanged, as though nothing outside could unsettle her. Lopez meant to tap the glass, to speak, but a hand came across her shoulder and held her back. Keller, he had appeared without sound, his words heavy despite their quiet. Do your job and stay out of what is not your jurisdiction. He glanced through the glass, eyes full of control. The warning needed no elaboration. He threatened not with words, but with the way he stared, measuring obedience. Lopez nodded. She turned away, walking off with bristles under her skin. Part of her wanted to question, to intervene. Another part understood the system made no room for anyone who overstepped too soon. In the main corridor, she met a colleague about to end his shift. Seeing her face, he jerked his chin. Something up? She answered curtly, nothing at all, and quickened her pace. Yet the question echoed with every step. Why would she not save herself? Why would someone like that choose silence? What was she waiting for? Or for whom? In the holding room, Eleanor remained exactly as before, hands resting loosely on her lap, shoulders straight, head slightly tilted. She did not sleep, nor did she wait for anyone to come speak. She was simply watching how this world handled those stripped of labels. With each passing minute, another hue of the system revealed itself. Who stayed neutral? Who was indifferent? Who feared? And who acted? A soft click sounded beyond the door. Footsteps halted outside. Eleanor opened her eyes, unblinking, greeting the unspoken presence. The afternoon in the downtown area passed like any other day. People dispersed toward home. Car horns blurred into the music, drifting from street-side shops. The sun retreated behind tall buildings, casting its final golden light on the stone pavement. But while the city slipped into its usual rhythm, a video less than a minute long began a different journey, reaching millions of devices nationwide. Eli Watkins, 13, an 8th grader at Franklin Middle School, was eating ice cream with his mother at a street corner not far from the scene. When he saw a black woman being stopped by police next to a white Bentley, Eli instinctively pulled out his phone. He didn't think too much, just sensed that something felt off about the scene. The woman wasn't shouting or resisting. The officer, on the other hand, appeared overly aggressive. Eli recorded from a distance, trying to capture the full frame of the officer handcuffing the woman in absolute silence. He caught the moment a black man was shoved down while trying to intervene, and the crowd watched in silence. The video was 47 seconds long. Eli posted it on his personal TikTok with the caption, "She looks like someone I've seen on TV." No hashtags, no further comment. He quickly forgot the incident, engrossed in rewatching a football match on his phone. But the algorithm didn't forget. Almost immediately, the video received hundreds of views from local accounts. 10 minutes later, a popular user reposted it, adding, "Something's definitely off here." By the first hour, the video had hit 20,000 views. By the second, it passed 100,000. By the fourth hour, the hashtag Bentley arrest was trending. The audience began to split. Some were furious. So she got handcuffed just for driving an expensive car? Look how she's standing, calm to the point of being scary. Who is she? Others were sharper. Wait, isn't this the judge from the XYZ ruling last year? Old press photos resurfaced. Some accounts dug up an image of Eleanor Graves during a federal hearing 3 years ago and compared it to the video. The same face, the same features, the same eyes, eerily identical. Another group reacted completely differently. They mocked the event as a weird, real-life moment. Sarcastic comments emerged. Driving a Bentley without paperwork? Then the arrest makes sense. Others picked apart her outfit, her posture, her hairstyle, like she was a contestant in a reality show. What began as an anonymous arrest became a lightning rod. The handcuffed woman on the street was no longer a stranger. She began to bear a name, a title, a bigger question. Why is she silent? While Eleanor remained in the holding cell, Social media turned her into a symbol of something deeper. No one knew if she was aware of the viral video, but one thing was clear. She was no longer just a woman arrested on the street. She was becoming a test of truth and of public reaction in an age where everything can be distorted in 47 seconds. As the video circulated across platforms, those who had been at the scene that afternoon began to speak up, not through long posts, but through scattered, fragmented comments, like memories abruptly awakened. An office worker named Jared, stationed on the third floor of a building across the street, recounted, "I saw everything from the window. At first, I thought someone was resisting arrest, but she didn't do anything. I wasn't even sure what I should do." He admitted to taking some photos, but hesitated to share. "Didn't want the hassle," he wrote. "It felt strange, but no one else said anything, so I stayed silent too." An elderly flower vendor at the street corner told a local reporter she didn't walk like a regular person. When they handcuffed her, she looked straight ahead. The way she looked, I couldn't take my eyes off her. I don't know who she is, but I'm sure she's not who they think she is. A student captured a second video from a side angle showing the moment Micah was pushed down. He kept it in his phone, reluctant to post it. "I recorded it because something felt wrong, but the officer's expression bothered me, like he was trying to prove something." Among dozens of shared clips, the image of Eleanor standing beside the Bentley, hands cuffed behind her, became a frame replayed hundreds of thousands of times. She didn't cry, scream, or plead. She simply looked. Her gaze wasn't one of begging or fury. It was still, so still that many found it off, a kind of wrongness that felt like witnessing something forbidden without the words to name it. Public reaction began to shift. From mockery, the discourse turned to debate. One person wrote, "She reminds me of someone I've seen on TV." Another dug up an image of Eleanor Graves from a federal hearing 3 years ago, placing it beside the clip. The face, the hairstyle, the stare, undeniable. A well-known criminal defense attorney confirmed, "If this is Eleanor Graves, the federal judge who ruled on the Milner case, Ridge Point PD better start worrying." Layers of public discourse began to unfold. Celebrities reposted the video with the question, "Why was a judge treated like this?" Independent reporters began tracing the identity of the original uploader. Short clips made their way into nightly news broadcasts. The phrase "Bentley arrest" appeared in headlines, no longer just a viral hashtag. But what drew the most attention wasn't Eleanor's title. It was the question, why did she choose silence? A judge with full legal authority could have ended the ordeal with a single word or a phone call, but she didn't. She remained silent, as if waiting for something else. That silence, over time, was no longer seen as a victim's weakness. It came to be viewed as intentional, a form of resistance without noise, powerful enough to shake the system. Isabel Lopez left headquarters close to 9 in the evening, her head heavy after a day she could no longer ignore. Returning to her small fifth-floor apartment in the southern Ridge Point housing block, she changed clothes, brewed coffee, and opened her computer. The screen lit up as her pulse quickened. Lopez replayed the internal hallway footage. Though she had watched it 3 times already, this time she slowed it, second by second. Eleanor Graves was led through like any other arrestee, yet the woman's face, those eyes, made it impossible to deceive herself further. Something was deeply wrong, not with the handcuffed woman, but with how the entire system ignored the obvious. She captured 2 frames, one of Keller standing near the Bentley, badge visible, face icy. Another of Eleanor, wrists bound, head held high, gaze fixed straight ahead, not a flicker of fear. Her hand hovered over enter, hesitation stretching seconds. At last, she logged into a private encryption app and typed the only address she trusted, tasha.monroe@privatepost.org. Tasha Monroe, in her 30s, had attended every major trial in the region. 5 years at the Ridge Point Post gave her a wide network, but her investigation into Keller 2 years earlier had forced her off the investigative desk. She became an independent writer, created her own channel, and dug into stories mainstream outlets avoided. Though she no longer wielded the same reach, Tasha still commanded a loyal readership that trusted every word she wrote. When the email arrived, Tasha was editing another draft. The image on screen made her sit up straight. She enlarged the photo of Eleanor in cuffs. Recognition took 3 seconds. Her first question burst out. Why was she arrested? The second, why is nobody talking? Tasha dialed Lopez. Few words were needed. It's her, Lopez said first. I know, Tasha answered. Nothing more. Both understood. This was not the first time the system had staged such a scene, but it was the first time the victim was someone who would not be forgotten. After the call, Tasha opened her laptop, searched the local police database, detention bulletins, citizen reports. Not a single line about a black woman arrested downtown. No report, no public record, no name. Tasha sat motionless for minutes. On her desk lay old files, copies of Keller's investigative dossier, complaints from a suppressed property seizure case, and several photos of Eleanor at a congressional hearing 3 years ago. She reopened them, not out of doubt, but to remind herself that truth had once been visible. She created a new file titled, When the System Thinks No One is Watching. She wrote the opening lines. Sharp as a blade. On day X of month Y in downtown Ridgepoint, a black woman was arrested in public. She did not resist. She was not protected. Her name is Eleanor Graves. A federal judge. Ridgepoint District Police Headquarters sits hidden behind administrative blocks, its heavy gray concrete like a fortress. As Eleanor passed the main lobby, she glanced at the right-hand corridor where, 3 years ago, she had ordered the internal floor map to be updated during an inspection. The map was gone. In its place stood a lifeless electronic board and a few young officers who walked by without looking at her face. Keller walked beside her, silent. At the intake desk, he handed the next shift an incomplete arrest form, the detainee's name left blank, temporarily filled with unidentified. His voice was curt. Take her to holding, no statement yet. Then he turned away without a backward glance. Eleanor was led to initial processing. No one asked her name. They proceeded as if everything were predetermined. Fingerprint scan, bag check, inventory of phone, wallet, the metal pen she always carried. A young officer read the list, eyes lingering a second on the leather notebook's cover, then moving on without a question. The station was neither noisy nor welcoming. It was cold, as if designed to mute any protest by the steady rhythm of procedure. Everyone seemed intent on doing just their part. Not more, no less. No one asked why a well-dressed middle-aged woman with sharp eyes was brought in without resistance. At a corner desk, Brett, a rookie transferred from records, was entering data. Seeing the blank detainee name field, he looked toward the holding cells. Something about the woman's face made him hesitate. He quietly opened Google and typed, Eleanor Graves. A series of images appeared. One looked almost identical. The eyes a perfect match. He started to ask a nearby superior, then stopped. What he had just read and seen made him waver. He quietly closed the tab, typed, female, black, approximately 60, and hit save. Eleanor was placed in the temporary holding room, a small space with a bench and 2 one-way mirrors. She sat still, hands on her lap, eyes on the single narrow window. She did not ask for a lawyer, did not request a phone call, and did not contest any procedure. Her calm was not weakness. Everyone who passed cast a glance and then withdrew, sensing something amiss yet not daring to name it. Some looked at her a few seconds longer before returning to their tasks. Footsteps, forms, routines, it all continued as if this were just another ordinary day in 100 indifferent days. Meanwhile, across town, Tasha Monroe was typing the opening lines of an article soon to be published. In her hands lay the truth. In the holding cell, Eleanor remained silent, yet every officer averting their eyes, every wrong data entry, every rookie's muted click, each was helping to finalize an indictment the system itself was unconsciously writing. Keller left the temporary holding cell not long after handing over his shift. He did not leave the station immediately, but stopped by the records office where impound documents are processed, before entering the federal system. In his hand was an incomplete form. The arrestee statement section was still blank, and identity verification had been crossed out in blue ink. He laid the file on the desk and murmured to the clerk on duty, "Hold on to this. Don't run it through the verification system. Possible impersonation." The clerk looked up, brow furrowing slightly. "Impersonation?" Keller offered no further explanation. His voice remained even, cold. "I'm clarifying it. For now, don't send it off. File it under manual review." After a moment's silence, the clerk nodded, not out of full trust, but because arguing with Keller during a night shift was unwise. At that same moment, a call came through the station switchboard. On the other end was a representative from the Federal Oversight Office, inquiring about the detention status of a person arrested downtown earlier that afternoon. The dispatcher prepared to transfer the call to the processing unit. Passing by, Keller caught the exchange. He motioned to halt, picked up the phone, and lowered his voice, speaking in clipped sentences. "Still under review, no verified ID, possibly a misidentification." Then he hung up and told the dispatcher, "Wrong number, not related, carry on." The dispatcher eyed him for a few seconds, then complied. No one asked to verify the call's origin. From the internal system, a short message flashed across the night shift group. Subject held since afternoon. Identity unconfirmed, awaiting further instructions. The line scrolled across multiple screens. No one replied. As if it were part of a familiar routine, no one thought to do anything more. The silence did not stem from a lack of information, but from a habit of sidestepping trouble. Everyone understood that some cases were best left untouched. When the night shift officially began, Lopez returned to the office. She set down her bag, powered up her computer, and checked the list of detainees still pending entry. The name she waited for had yet to appear. She glanced at the duty board and asked a colleague, "Where's the woman arrested this afternoon?" He skimmed a few data cells and answered crisply, "Still in holding, identity not verified." The response seemed straightforward, yet it sent a chill down Lopez's spine. It was not Keller's lingering presence that unsettled her, but the fact that everyone, from junior staff to the watch command, was accepting the situation as normal. Everything in the station continued to run smoothly. Keyboards clacked in a steady rhythm. Printers whirred and phones rang intermittently. Those sounds, once symbols of order, now felt heavy and desiccated. Beneath that sonic backdrop, a woman remained held without a name. No bulletin, no cross-check, no one asking why. And with just a few signatures, a single blue strike, a blocked call, her right to identification had vanished. Layers of legal protection were quietly stripped away. Without violence, without charges, things were unfolding far too smoothly. And it was precisely that smoothness that was most frightening. In the dim holding room, Eleanor sat upright, hands resting on her lap like someone awaiting a conference to begin. She made no extraneous movements, showed no sign of worry. She did not mind the passage of time. With each moment, she listened more than she looked. The metallic slam of a distant door, hurried high heels on hallway tiles, a snatch of dialogue between two officers changing shifts, all mapped into an auditory blueprint she traced like one reading a system's footprints from the inside. Keller's voice leaked from the control room during a brief, brittle exchange. Then silence. A footstep stopped just outside the glass panel, hesitated, and disappeared without a knock. She did not turn, but she knew someone had meant to speak, and then thought better of it. She also knew why. When a guard brought in a meal tray, he said nothing. He set it on the wall-mount table, his gaze skimming her face for less than a second before turning away, like someone glimpsing what should not be seen. Another officer came later to collect her purse, phone, and a silver-plated pen. He recited the items by rote, checking them off mechanically. Finished, he nodded and left, asking neither her name nor the reason for her detention. Eleanor needed no questions. She merely observed and memorized. In her mind, each person's reaction was neatly categorized. She took no notes on paper, relying instead on the intuition of someone who had seen too many human truths beneath official uniforms. She knew the greatest danger did not lie in Keller. It lay in those who chose not to know, preserving their own safety. Fear in the station did not manifest as shouting or frantic strides. It emerged through apathy, through eyes that dared not linger, through absolute silence in a place where questions should be asked. No one wondered why a poised, authoritative woman remained in custody past business hours without identification. No one asked why the record was missing. No one asked anything at all, not from ignorance but from the dread of hearing what they did not wish to know, and of having to act on it. Eleanor understood the system was not rotting because of a few men like Keller. It cracked because too many who knew remained silent. She did not need time to reach that conclusion. What she needed now was to wait for someone brave enough to pose the first question, to witness the first reaction when her name appeared in a news alert. She was not impatient. The system's slowness was the very opportunity for it to slip deeper into error. The more people kept silent, the louder the blast when truth finally surfaced, and none of them would be allowed to claim ignorance. Eleanor closed her eyes and relaxed her shoulders, though her mind kept moving. She envisioned every next step, every face, every potential reaction when her name made the first headline. She was not detained. She was waiting. And while everyone believed they had smothered a spark, they did not realize that this very hush was accumulating pressure by the hour. Micah Sanders returned to Ridgepoint Police Headquarters at dawn. The exhaustion from a sleepless night and countless unanswered calls was etched on his face. In his hand was an official confirmation from the Federal Legal Representation Office, formally requesting access to the unidentified detainee from the previous afternoon. He presented the document at the reception desk, only to receive a cold shake of the head. The clerk, voice sounding pre-programmed, replied, "The file is incomplete. The detainee's identity is still under verification, and there is no legal basis to process your request." Micah frowned. "Is the detainee a black woman, wearing a white shirt, driving a white Bentley?" he asked. The clerk glanced at him, then at the monitor, saying nothing. Ultimately, Micah was denied access to both the holding records and the detainee list. Stepping back from the counter with a heavy heart, he realized one thing clearly. The system was deliberately stalling for time. He was crossing the lobby, ready to leave, when a familiar face appeared through a side door. Rookie Officer Isabel Lopez, coffee cup and case file in hand. Micah approached, lowering his voice. "Lopez, you know me. You recognized her yesterday, didn't you?" She paused, scanning the area. No one was within sight. Lopez slowed and drew Micah toward a side corridor. "Do you have any proof?" she asked, her eyes flickering. Micah produced a scanned copy of an Eleanor Graves speech published 3 years earlier. "I don't need you to confirm anything. I just need you to admit this is wrong." She studied him, then gestured toward the fire escape stairwell, an area without cameras. Lopez softly lashed the door and whispered, "Last year, I saw Keller's name in an internal affairs file. Over 10 property seizure cases handled off protocol. Most of the victims were people of color. Not one case led to prosecution." She paused, then added, "When the file reached the county investigative division, every page involving Keller was removed. Not deleted, just moved elsewhere." The note read, "Evidence process under review." Micah grimaced. "Under review or buried?" Lopez did not answer. "No one dares mention Keller in debriefings. Each time a complaint is filed, a memo from upstairs orders it shelved." Micah clenched his fist. "So who intervened to make the file disappear?" Lopez met his gaze for the first time, her voice like a nail being driven home. "They don't need to hide it. They just leave it under the desk." No more words were necessary. Both understood that this system did not need secrecy to survive. It only needed enough people to look away. The audit from last year was still vivid for Lopez. She had handled a preliminary claim over a property seizure in a low-income neighborhood, a single-story house owned by an elderly black woman living alone, seized in 20 minutes on grounds of fire hazard, even though the technical report raised no such alarm. In the attached photos, Officer Ron Keller's name appeared as on-scene commander. When Lopez forwarded the file to the county prosecutor, she was told to remove Keller's name from every document. The explanation was simple: to avoid internal sensitivity. She had asked, Why remove the officer's name if everything was by the book? The response was a blank, emotionless stare from her superior and a reminder, you don't need to understand, just do your job. Afterward, she reviewed old cases on her own. A troubling list emerged. Nearly 20 seizures over 3 years following the same pattern. Targets were mostly elderly, people of color, living alone with limited access to lawyers. In every incident report, Keller appeared, sometimes as first on scene, sometimes providing field support. Yet on every approval page, his name vanished. The paperwork was flawless, an eerie perfection produced by a machine whose path had been cleared in advance. Lopez recited all of this in an even tone, as though reading sworn testimony. Micah did not interrupt. When she finished, he asked, "Has anyone ever tried to make this public?" She nodded. One person, the head of internal oversight, a white woman. She filed a report with the state. 7 days later, she resigned for mental health reasons. He knew that phrasing, internal exile. He looked at the old complaint form Lopez had handed him, no longer legally valid and lacking a final signature, yet containing every detail needed to reveal the truth. Micah slipped the form into his pocket, his eyes never leaving Lopez's. If Eleanor touches this chain, if she's the only one with a stature to expose it, then this is no mistaken arrest. Lopez inclined her head. She said nothing more, but her eyes confirmed it. Micah turned to leave, gripping the yellowed document. Near the D, ooh, he paused, looked back, and said quietly, "If they keep the file under the desk, I'll drag the whole desk into the square." No one answered, but in that moment the silence was different. One of readiness. This time, nothing would remain out of sight. The night passed slowly and cold inside Ridgepoint Police Headquarters. Eleanor remained seated in the shabby holding cell, the fluorescent light casting her shadow on the wall, creating a dense silence. Hard to tell whether it was fatigue or resistance. She did not sleep, not out of fear, but because she needed to witness every small thing, the sounds, the footsteps, the way the system reacted to a person it was still unsure how to treat. Near midnight, an elderly officer came on duty. His name was Richard Gable, over 60, a veteran of several big city units before being assigned to Ridgepoint a few years ago. When he read the name on the holding log, his eyes lingered longer than usual. He repeated the name in his mind several times, as if confirming an old memory he had not yet retrieved. As he passed the cell, his gaze paused for a few seconds. Eleanor opened her eyes to meet his without a nod, without expression. He hesitated for exactly 1 beat, then moved on. When filling out the duty ledger, he skipped the box marked normal or ab. At dawn, a faint breeze slipped through the high, narrow window. Eleanor sat upright, her eyes on the thin mist settling over the town. Out in the hallway, the whir of the coffee machine began, signaling a new day that would start with familiar habits. No questions, no interruption. Gable brought a breakfast tray and placed it outside the cell door. His hand set it down silently, his eyes avoiding the gaze inside. Eleanor said nothing, yet the moment he turned away, her voice rose, clear and firm. "If I were a nobody, how far would this go?" She did not raise her voice or court drama. It was a question addressed to someone who had lived long enough to understand the price of silence. Gable stopped. His shoulders trembled slightly. Not with anger, he did not turn back. He knew she was speaking to him, but the question required no answer. It only needed to be heard. In the surveillance room, Lopez, back on the night shift, reread the entire duty report. The name Eleanor Graves still sat alone on the log. No one dared to update. Click after click, she tried to enter the information into the federal identity verification system. But her personnel code was blocked at the final step. An error window popped up. Access restricted by special priority clearance. At the same time, Micah sat in his car outside headquarters. He had not slept. His eyes were bloodshot, his hand gripping the stack of documents he and Eleanor had revised together. Though he knew he was being watched, he refused to retreat. His phone buzzed. A message from Tasha. "First draft tonight. Have your witness list ready." Everything had begun to move, though no one had spoken aloud. But for Eleanor, a long, silent night did not mean surrender. She was observing, choosing. When the moment came, Every detail she had noted would become evidence against the entire apparatus that had once dismissed her silence. The sky was not yet fully light. The fluorescent lamps in the corridor faded back as the darkness outside the window thinned layer by layer. Night withdrew as if making room for the first frail glow of morning. In the cell, Eleanor opened her eyes. For hours she had sat motionless as stone, but now she shifted, looked at the empty space ahead, and spoke. Her voice rang out, not loud, not weak, steady and just strong enough to pierce the silence that had blanketed the night. If I were a nobody, how far would this go? She looked at no one in particular. The words did not carry a direct accusation, yet they weighed like a verdict, forcing anyone who heard them to question themselves. A young officer walking past the camera room froze when he heard it. He turned toward the cell window, but was unsure whom she had addressed. Her eyes seemed not to seek dialogue, but to shine straight at an invisible system behind every wall. He did not reply, nor did he continue immediately. After standing a few seconds, he pulled out his phone, typed a few words, erased them, finally slipped it back in his pocket, and walked on. Yet the sentence had hooked into his thoughts like a barbed spear. A little lat, the morning shift took over. A female staffer carrying water along the corridor paused at the cell for just a moment, long enough to catch Eleanor's gaze through the small window. She said nothing, merely nodded, an unconscious reflex toward someone worthy of respect, then moved away faster than she had come. No one mentioned the sentence. Yet somehow it spread. In the duty kitchen, someone said, "I heard the old lady just said something chilling." Another replied, "Gave me goosebumps." By the end of the morning, a nameless message landed in Tasha Monroe's inbox, consisting of only 4 words. "She has spoken up." Tasha was sitting in a cafe editing her unfinished article when the alert appeared. She stopped typing, leaned back, her eyes on the screen, as though seeing the first crack in a shell once thought unbreakable. Eleanor remained where she was, but after that utterance something had shifted. An imperceptible change impossible to measure by rank or action. A middle-aged officer walking past a few minutes later stopped. He recognized her. Memories of a hearing 3 years earlier surged back. He said nothing. He moved on as if he had never paused. When a person needs no shouting, yet makes an entire system listen, it is no longer merely resistance. It is a declaration of war. Lopez received the notice early in the morning, just as she stepped into headquarters. The message was brief. Report immediately to the internal surveillance room on the 3rd floor. Before she could ask anything else, the messenger had already walked away. The air along the corridor seemed to sag. Colleagues' glances slid past her, quick, evasive, as though someone had learned something they wanted no part of. Lopez's stride was firm, but an invisible knot tightened inside her. The room sat at the end of the hallway, its door painted white, containing only a round table and 2 chairs. A mid-level internal affairs officer waited, a stack of photos spread before him. Without preamble, he pushed the file toward her. The images were crystal clear. Eleanor Graves in handcuffs, her face showing no fear. A crowd gathered around, and Keller half hidden at the edge of the frame. The supervisor met Lopez's eyes. "Why did you extract these and send them out without reporting it?" His face betrayed no feeling. The question hung like a suspended verdict. Lopez held silent for a few seconds. She looked at Eleanor's photo, then raised her head. "Because I believe no one in here will do what must be done." No one wrote down that answer, yet something shifted in the gaze across the table. The officer set down a single sheet, a temporary transfer order to an outlying substation, citing violation of evidence handling protocol. "We're not firing you, but if you refuse, someone else will take your place and no one will ask why." His voice was level, as if reading from a policy manual. Lopez nodded slightly. "I won't sign, and I won't take back what I did." She left the room carrying only a slip of paper, noting await further instruction from headquarters. No one touched her things. No one said anything explicit, yet as she passed the duty desk, someone muttered just loud enough, "You'll be out before long." It sounded less like a threat than a prophecy. The hallway lights glowed. Her desk was still there. The coffee maker clicked and hissed. Everything ran on schedule, as always, except Lopez's heart pounding faster than usual. She knew she had crossed the invisible line between resistance and consequence, and once across, there was no way back. In the elevator to the lobby, she unlocked her phone by habit. A message popped up from an unknown number. Don't stop. No signature, no explanation. Yet each word carried the weight of a vow. Someone was still watching, still believing she was not alone. Lopez walked out of headquarters, shoulders tense, chin high. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, whether she would keep her badge or be ejected from the legal machinery like a faulty cog, but she knew that right now she was part of something larger than personal safety. A small touch had formed a fracture, and she would not stop pressing. Tasha Monroe was sitting in her usual cafe when Lopez's text arrived. I was called to internal affairs. Might be reassigned. No complaint, no request for help, yet to Tasha, every word struck like a spark. She knew the system had begun to react. She reopened her first article, checked the share count, then pulled next week's Ridgepoint duty roster. Lopez's name was gone, replaced by someone unfamiliar. Tasha froze for several seconds, then hit call. Lopez did not answer. A text bounced back. I can't talk right now. Don't use this number again. The sudden loss of contact with her insider stalled Tasha, but she also knew it meant someone had found the leak. The system's first response is always to cut off the blood, not stitch the wound. That even in gash she received a strange email from an almost untraceable address. Attached was a draft document, apparently internal police material, listing a monitoring roster for media activity relating to the unidentified detainee. On it were her name, several other freelance reporters, and most surprising, a communications aide to Senator Alden, followed by a note, increase surveillance and disrupt if necessary. Tasha closed her laptop, a chill running up her spine. One front of the system was striking back, targeting those who leaked information. On the other, they still dared not confirm the woman's identity. That told her they were unsure they could stem the public tide once the truth emerged. Meanwhile, Eleanor remained in the holding cell. News outside roared. Inside stretched a long silence. No one questioned her. No one spoke her name. Officers avoided her gaze, not out of fear, but because they could not face someone capable of shattering the worldview they trusted. A woman arrested, detained, neither beaten nor interrogated, yet not released, the stasis formed a vacuum, both a denial of justice and proof that the system lacks standards when it fails to recognize overt power. Tasha typed a fresh headline. Who's trying to blind the public? This piece would dig into procedure, how police control information flows, and how they react when a young officer refuses to remain silent. She did not know where she could publish it or whether it would vanish within an hour, but when the truth grows strong enough, it needs no hiding place. Tasha drew a long breath, fingers racing. In the small room, only the clack of keys and quiet sighs broke the stillness. Outside, city lights burned, yet somewhere fractures were spreading from the hardest stone at the core. And once a crack begins, nothing can ever be sealed again. Tasha Monroe finished her first article just before midnight. She made no major edits, added no extra sources, and contacted no one to double-check the details. Everything that needed saying was already contained in the images she had seen, and in the tightness she had carried since the day she was forced out of the Ridgepoint Post newsroom. The headline bore no name, offered no legal facts, only a single question. Who is the woman handcuffed in the middle of the street? The opening sentence sounded arid and clinical. Yesterday afternoon, in downtown Ridgepoint, a black woman was handcuffed in public by a police officer. Passers-by walked on. A few stopped to film. The rest turned their heads away. She used no sensational language, pressed no argument about who was right or wrong. Instead, each short paragraph drove in the same question. If that person was not famous, held no title, if no one knew who she was, would anyone call the act unjust? If she were your mother, your former teacher, or the quiet neighbor who has lived across the street for 10 years, Would you find the scene troubling? Tasha ended with a plain statement, "When a resume becomes the only shield that commands respect, what remains is no longer justice. It is a stage set for collapse." She posted the piece on her personal blog around 2 in the morning. She did not share it on social media, nor email it to any former colleagues. Yet, within 5 minutes, the article began drawing traffic. Several users from anti-racism forums reposted it. The first comment came from a law school alum who had once watched Eleanor in court. "I'm not sure it's her, but I know the feeling when someone with power stays silent to expose the core of a society." By 8 that morning, the piece had more than 40,000 reads. Most comments ignored the woman's identity, focusing instead on how the system behaved when it assumed she had no means of defense. A user in California wrote, "I saw a similar arrest once. The person was homeless that time. No one wrote a word." Tasha did not reply. She sat, eyes fixed on a single phrase on screen. "If you are nobody, are you still treated as human?" In the holding cell, Eleanor was told the article had appeared. A young female staffer silently scrolled through her phone, closed it, and said nothing. Eleanor looked at her, asked no question, and merely shut her eyes for a moment. That morning, no one yet knew the woman's name, but those who had watched the clip or read the article no longer viewed it as an isolated incident. It had become a mirror, and they began to see themselves inside it. Between the two of them, they cleaned up everything they found, and fetching Don Castle's piece never mentioned Eleanor Graves by name. It provoked fiercer reactions than any formal investigation. The title's question kept spreading, "Who is the woman handcuffed in the street?" Yet the unease lay less in discovering who she was than in confronting how the system acted when it did not know her. From civil society groups to law student forums, from Twitter to Reddit, the article was quoted hundreds of times. Each share highlighted a different excerpt. Each comment carried its own layer of anger, disappointment, mockery, or fear. Someone asked, if she had full papers and the law on her side, why stay silent? Another answered, because she wanted to see how many would stand for justice when no rule forced them to. A university professor in the South cited the piece in a lecture on implicit racial bias. A group of high school students shot a short film reenacting the street arrest, modeled on the article's imagery. The ripple reached officials. A member of a federal inquiry committee reposted the article with just 3 words, "This is systemic." Hours later, Senator Alden's office received hundreds of emails demanding an independent probe into the Ridgepoint police. At the station, the mood grew tense. Some officers avoided mentioning Keller's name. A few secretly replayed the original clip, scrolling through the comments. No one spoke aloud, yet some began to question themselves. Had I been there, what would I have done? Keller maintained silence. He ordered a sweep of call logs and all internal mail. An emergency meeting convened. No minutes, no recordings. One message repeated, "This is an isolated incident. Do not let it snowball." In her small rented room, Tasha received an anonymous email titled, "If she really is Eleanor Graves, why has no one confirmed it?" Attached were 2 blurred photos, one from a trial 3 years ago, one from the circulating clip. The face, the gaze, and the features matched. Tasha did not reply. She opened a new document. This time the headline was shorter. Why is she silent? She knew the second piece would be different. It would no longer test social reflexes. It would begin tearing away the structure that shielded wrongdoing, closing in on a woman who had once been the final voice of justice. When one person says nothing and the whole society has to shout in their stead, the story ceases to be about an individual. It becomes a verdict on a system that thought itself untouchable. News spread with the speed of a nameless storm. Within 24 hours of the incident, social media overflowed with images of a black woman handcuffed on a city street beside a white Bentley. Yet no one knew who she was. The press tiptoed around the story. Morning newscasts offered only vague lines. A woman was arrested on suspicion of car theft, even though viewers could clearly see she wore high-end business attire and showed no sign of resistance. In the small room where Tasha Monroe worked, her computer kept running automated news feeds. The young reporter sat still, eyes fixed on the original clip shot from across the street. Then her phone rang. An unknown number. She answered. A man's voice said briefly, "I can't come forward, but the woman in the clip is Judge Eleanor Graves. She once served on the Southeast Federal District Court." The call ended. Tasha needed little time to verify. She opened the public records database, typed Eleanor Graves, and with a few clicks, everything appeared. Office history, official portraits, a copy of Bentley's registration. Everything matched. Still, she did not publish at once. Tasha sent the material to a colleague who covers state-level judicial affairs, adding one question: is this really her? The reply came 10 minutes later. "No doubt, and if you run it, brace yourself." Tasha wrote non-stop. Her headline was plain, not sensational. The woman arrested on the street is Federal Judge Eleanor Graves. After she hit publish, she simply watched the view counter leap every second. In under 2 hours, major outlets echoed the piece. New York Sentinel, Justice Weekly, Black Voices Review, each with its own angle but all citing Tasha Monroe. Netizens no longer treated the clip as a curious oddity. Anger surged as they shared it with captions such as, "If they can humiliate a judge like this, what happens to ordinary people?" Some recognized Eleanor from the high-profile trials she had presided over. One posted a screenshot of her on the bench years ago, writing beneath it, "Once the one who passed judgment, now the one judged in the street." That same day, several black politicians spoke out. Representative Clara Whitman wrote on her page, "If the system can degrade a judge this way, it has confessed that skin color matters more than office." Tasha knew she had just lit the fuse of a much larger confrontation, yet she felt no fear. Only one line echoed in her mind for the next article. Her identity isn't the news. It proves that justice can be treated as a nobody simply for lacking a badge. The next morning, the press packed tightly outside Ridgepoint Police Headquarters. TV stations set up cameras. Reporters jostled for space. Every question aimed at one point. "The arrestee is Judge Eleanor Graves. What do you have to say?" For hours, the press office door stayed shut. At last, a police spokesperson emerged, read a single sentence, then left. "We have not confirmed the detainee's identity as the matter is under record review." The crowd erupted. A reporter shouted, "No confirmation, no denial." How does the system allow this? Inside the presidency, the air grew heavier than ever. Young officers whispered in hallways. The name Eleanor Graves was spoken in hushed tones, as though people feared being overheard. The Internal Affairs chief ordered a full audit of all arrest reports from the previous day, a move without precedent in Ridgepoint. At the State Department of Justice, high-level phone calls intensified. In an emergency meeting, a regional chief judge asked bluntly, "Who is responsible for handcuffing a federal judge on a public street without preliminary verification?" Another warned, "If we delay, this will become a template for resistance." No one disagreed. All knew there was no room to deny. Meanwhile, Tasha Monroe began receiving quiet signals. An anonymous email hit the newsroom inbox. "Take the story down. Judge or not, nothing changes. Don't put yourself on the list." She quietly logged the IP address. That same day, an editor from a major paper called, half advice, half threat, "Tasha, you're digging into something many people have already buried. Let it rest." Her answer was terse. "If they buried it that deep, something down there is rotting." Instead of retreating, she wrote a second analysis. Not about Eleanor, but a single question. Why is Eleanor silent? She proposed that the silence of someone accustomed to wielding words was not fear, but a test, an experiment to see society's true reaction when the humiliated party is not powerless, but has chosen to stand as an ordinary person. She ended the piece, "If justice does not speak for itself, will anyone speak for it? Or will we leave it lying beneath 3-minute news segments?" The article was shared over 100,000 times in 2 days. A new tag trended, hashtag "If I were you." People began recounting times they were wrongly suspected, cuffed, humiliated, simply because they had nothing to prove they were worthy of trust. And, just as predicted, the system started to pull back. The police department issued no further statements. A leaked internal memo showed an order to suspend all public comments on the arrest. But it was too late. Eleanor's identity was clear. The real question was no longer who was arrested, but who was afraid of being seen. Tasha Monroe's spam inbox had over 400 unread emails. Most were diet pill ads or hollow death threats from digging too deep into the police department. But today, one subject line made her stop. "He knows." She clicked it. The email contained a single line. Keller knew who she was before he even reached for the cuffs. Don't let him rewrite the story. Below was an attachment. Tasha put on her headphones, her finger hovering over the stop button. But the recording wasn't yelling or threats. It was Keller's voice. Clear and composed. "It's Graves. She's the one who forced Brady into early retirement. These black folks think they can write the law now. Time she remembered who holds the gun in this city." Tasha sat still for several seconds. This wasn't just evidence, this was a confession. The arrest hadn't been based on suspicion, but was a calculated public humiliation of a black judicial symbol. She opened the attached image. It was a screenshot from the police department's automatic plate recognition system. The log confirmed the white Bentley's license plate had been verified under the name Eleanor Graves exactly 11 minutes before Keller stopped her. There was no way he didn't know. No way he could claim confusion. Tasha shot up. She dialed Eleanor, 4 rings, then voicemail. She called Lopez. No answer. Turning to her laptop, she opened her editing software. A draft headline popped up. Not a mistake. A message. "Your justice only exists if we allow it." But then she paused. Releasing this story now would be an explosion, like a gunshot right through the mask of the Ridgepoint police force. She had to be sure Eleanor was ready. She needed to hear it from her. By late morning, Tasha arrived at attorney Micah Sanders' office, where Eleanor had been staying. She pushed the door open and found Eleanor sitting in a wooden chair, holding a teacup with no steam. Her gaze wasn't fixed on anything or anyone, more like she was staring through the wall in front of her. Tasha said nothing. She simply placed the USB on the table. Eleanor glanced at it, then opened her laptop and plugged it in. The recording played. She listened once, unblinking. A second time, still expressionless. By the third, she finally spoke. "So it's out?" Tasha's voice caught. "You knew?" Eleanor gave a slight nod. He didn't act like someone confused. He acted like someone performing a role he rehearsed. Tasha steadied herself. "I was going to publish the piece tomorrow morning, but if you need more time—" "No need." Eleanor cut her off, her eyes locking onto Tasha's for the first time. "The longer we wait, the more the system wriggles out of it." "Publish it." Tasha hesitated a beat. "This article could take the whole department down." "Are you sure?" Eleanor leaned back, still holding the untouched teacup. "If I stay silent, Keller wins. If I speak out, I might lose, but at the very least, he'll know this. No one gets to handcuff justice without paying the price." Tasha needed no further words. She nodded and walked briskly out. Outside, the Ridgepoint sky remained gray, but it felt like the clouds were shifting. A storm was forming, and this time it wasn't coming from the police, but from the woman they once dismissed as a forgotten old lady on the sidelines. The office was silent enough to hear the ticking of the wall clock. Eleanor remained seated, unmoved, even after Tasha had left. The audio file had stopped playing long ago, but Keller's voice still lingered in the air. Every word, every breath, laced with smug malice. Micah walked in, placing a file on the desk without saying anything. He stood silently, waiting for Eleanor to respond, but she didn't turn around. "You heard it?" he asked. 3 times, Eleanor answered softly, "and I believe he meant every word, not because he knew who I was, but because he believed I had no power left to fight back." Micah sat down across from her. "I rechecked the internal files. Keller led the Ridgepoint Police Department's rapid response team back in 2009. Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "The year I requested a review of Brady's forced confession case." Micah nodded. You never knew Brady and Keller were close. No, Eleanor pressed her lips together. But now it all makes sense. That case cost Brady his career and pension. No one has brought it up since. Micah placed his hand on the file. I don't think Keller just wanted to humiliate you. I think he wanted to warn everyone who dares challenge the balance of power. Eleanor looked at him, her gaze slow and deep like a well. Do you think I haven't fought back enough? It's not that, but you've stayed silent for too long. The media, social networks, the entire black community, they're all watching you. Eleanor leaned back. A flicker of weariness crossed her face. They want me on TV, crying, retelling trauma. I can't do that. I'm not the face of sympathetic pain. I'm a judge. I speak with facts, not emotions. Micah remained quiet, knowing that for Eleanor, every action was weighed like a verdict, each word, each breath, deliberately measured. I'll give this file to Tasha, he said. Let the public see this wasn't a mistaken arrest. It was systematic retaliation. Eleanor nodded. And, if needed, I'll testify. Not just about Keller, but about the machine that made him. Micah stood. Before leaving, he asked with a half-joking tone, if you could go back to that moment by the Bentley, would you react differently? Eleanor didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, where the last light of day settled quietly on the rooftops of the lifeless office buildings. Then she shook her head gently. No, if I'd shouted my title to be treated differently, how would I be any different from those who kneel before fear? Micah left, and Eleanor remained. She didn't need anyone to confirm what was right or wrong, because some battles aren't won in court. They're won in how a person refuses to become a victim, even when treated like a nameless figure. The ground floor corridor of Ridgepoint Police Department blazed under fluorescent lights, yet no one dared look directly at the woman emerging from the last interrogation room. Eleanor Graves stepped out after nearly 48 hours in custody with no formal charges, no summons, no written apology, only a suffocating silence clinging to each of her steps. Officers who were usually boisterous now lined the walls, staring at desks and shuffling paperwork. They all knew who she was, everyone did. After the handcuff video went viral overnight, Officer Isabel Lopez trailed 3 paces behind, pale from sleeplessness and guilt. Each click of Eleanor's heels sounded like a wordless indictment. At the lobby, Lopez whispered, I'm sorry, I know who you are, but I couldn't do anything. Eleanor stopped, eyes locking onto the averted gaze. Today I'm not suing him alone, she said, voice low yet carrying. I'm suing the system that forced you to stay silent. Tears rolled down Lopez's cheeks, not from fear, but from being stripped bare by truth. Outside, wan sunlight greeted Eleanor. Reporters thrust microphones forward, cameras rolled, bystanders raised their phones. A teenager murmured, It's the lady from the clip. Eleanor neither paused nor showed emotion. Her eyes, sharp as a cold blade, cut through the system that had jailed her without cause. A reporter shouted a question. She walked on as if unheard. In a nearby lot, a black sedan waited. Journalist Tasha Monroe leaned against the doer, clutching a file, eyes shining. Attorney Micah Sanders sat at the wheel. Eleanor entered the back seat. For 10 seconds, no one spoke. Only the doors' thud and the engine's rumble marked time. Watching the police building recede in the mirror, Eleanor leaned forward. I need a subpoena, not for Keller, for everyone who ever signed their name to that system. Micah nodded. This was now a reckoning built on refusing silence. The next day, in a small Justice Department conference room, Eleanor, Micah, and Deputy Attorney General Carl Whitmore met. No banners, no press. Whitmore began, The improper arrest is undeniable, but to probe the entire Ridgepoint PD, I need more than a viral clip. Eleanor placed a thick dossier on the table. Cases of suspect seizures over 10 years, complete with signatures, dates, race, AND, income. Whitmore scanned red-line charts. Over 80% targeted people of color and low-income households. What do you want? He asked. An independent commission, Eleanor replied. Outside the PD, beyond local funding, empowered to subpoena records and commanders. Whitmore leaned back. You know that will trigger political backlash. Eleanor's tone was calm steel. truth is most inconvenient to those who live on silence. Micah slid a folder forward. Analysis of altered warrants. They were ready to testify before Congress. Whitmore tapped the table, weighing the step. If I approve, can you handle public division? Public opinion has been divided for years, Eleanor answered. I'm only making it look itself in the eye. Whitmore stood, dossier in hand. Give me 24 hours. If the numbers hold, the commission goes through. He left, and Eleanor let out a quiet, genuine breath. Micah asked if she believed he would sign. She replied, "It doesn't matter. What matters is that this time, they can't pretend they didn't hear." Ridgepoint's weather had finally mellowed after a stretch of searing heat. A small room behind the law office was shielded by pale gray curtains, the light filtering through in mottled streaks across an old wooden desk. Eleanor sat beside a stack of closed case files, holding a cup of cold tea, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Micah paused in the doorway, then stepped in and closed the door behind him. Sitting opposite her at a careful distance, he waited. Eleanor, usually the master of silence, spoke first. "Can you tell me one thing? Why me? You have countless ways to help this community. Why investigate Keller and stand with me in a fight you knew would bring trouble?" Instead of answering, Micah pulled a small, worn photograph from his wallet and laid it on the desk. It showed a black woman in a school uniform holding the hand of a 10-year-old boy. Both were smiling, yet worry clouded the woman's eyes. "That's my mother, Gloria Sanders, a middle school teacher, before she lost her job," he said. Without prompting, he continued, "When he was 12, police knocked on their door at 7 in the morning, claiming the family had obstructed an officer. As his mother stepped outside, she was struck, pinned to the steps, and cuffed in front of him. The officer who signed the warrant and led that raid was Ron Keller. His mother spent 3 nights in jail, no phone call, no lawyer, no charges, then lost her job 3 weeks later because the school wanted no trouble. She took janitorial work at a hospital and avoided his gaze each night, not from shame, but from fear he would grow up to accept such treatment. Micah's voice stayed calm, yet every word hit the walls like a hammer. He explained that when he entered law school, his mother feared he would serve a system she could never defeat, but he wanted to understand why someone educated and law-abiding could still be cuffed because of skin color. The day he watched Eleanor's arrest live, he didn't see Judge Graves. He saw his mother, a black woman stripped of dignity in broad daylight, while bystanders did nothing. From that moment, he vowed not to retreat because his mother had never had the chance to fight. Eleanor tightened her hands on the desk but let him finish. Then she met his gaze. "You're right. You won't retreat. And I won't let another mother stay silent either." The room fell quiet. Outside, city lights flickered on, but inside only 2 people remained, one carrying old shackles, the other shouldering what was left to mend what had been denied. Micah stepped out briefly, returning with a thick manila envelope sealed by 2 strips of opaque tape. On its face, 1 block-printed word, "Keller." "You're the first and only person I trust to open this," he said, placing it before her. Eleanor peeled back the tape and found a dense stack of papers, printouts, scanned files, internal memos annotated in red ink, each a fragment of memory the system had tried to bury. She read silently. A 2008 raid seizing an African immigrant family's SUV without a court order, signed by Keller. A 2010 property seizure of a widowed elderly woman's home under vague maintenance rules, again signed by Keller. Later, records with 2017 edit dates inserted into 2012 events, wording tweaked to justify earlier seizures, Keller's signature visible in original scans, yet missing from official copies. "We call it data restructuring for security," Micah explained. "It's really a trick to erase the trail and legalize the aftermath." Eleanor paused at a grainy photograph from a leaked internal report. Keller and other officers before a neighborhood map, rows of impounded cars beside them, their eyes cold with the certainty of men who believed they stood above the law. When she asked where it came from, Micah replied that his mother had kept the originals for 15 years as evidence of silence. After her death, he had expanded the files, cross-checking public copies against internal sources until every discrepancy exposed another layer of buried truth. No one else knew. Trusting the wrong person would make the dossier disappear, just as his mother had. Eleanor closed the files and rested her palm on the cover. "This isn't just evidence to indict Keller," she said. "It's a map of the system that allowed him to exist." Micah nodded. "And you have the voice strong enough to force them to answer." Gripping the envelope, Eleanor's voice rang with the authority she once commanded from the bench. "We're not toppling one man, we're making them admit that handcuffs are not instruments of justice." The Special Investigative Committee was announced on Monday morning in a terse bulletin from the State Department of Justice. No flashy press conference, no ornate wording, just 4 brief paragraphs confirming its independent authority, its makeup, and a pledge of freedom from local law enforcement interference, exactly as Eleanor wanted. Within 24 hours, the roster went public. A civil rights attorney with multiple victories against police misconduct, a federal monitor appointed by the Inspector General, an independent journalist, and a community representative once victimized by wrongful asset forfeiture. Eleanor became chair, unsurprising. What jarred public opinion was Ridgepoint Police Department's silence. No statement, no response. The first backlash came not from the police, but from politicians. A bloc of conservative legislators, led by Senator Frank Alden, held a separate press conference in less than 3 days, declaring that the committee is an overreach that threatens local administrative order. Right-wing outlets quickly launched a smear campaign, questioning Eleanor's true motives and calling the panel a sophisticated act of revenge by a woman nursing wounded pride. Tasha Monroe traced the media pushback to its financiers. One name kept resurfacing: the Local Order and Development Fund, the same outfit noted in a shelved forfeiture file involving Keller 3 years earlier. In the most recent public financial statement, Tasha found that the fund had bankrolled 3 state campaigns, including Alden's. She uncovered an anonymized donation funneled through a shell company straight into Alden's war chest, made right after an entire South Ridgepoint neighborhood was cleared for a commercial complex. Digging deeper, she located a leaked internal transaction record, showing Alden's closest aide approving disbursement of relocation aid, money that never reached any displaced family. Once her data set was complete, Tasha phoned Eleanor. "I've got what you need," she said in a low, steady voice. "And it goes beyond Keller. It reaches the Senate." Eleanor listened, then replied, "Right. If they mean to flip the table, let them flip it in the light." That night, in her small apartment, Tasha titled her new piece, "Behind the Handcuffs. Who's Pulling the Strings?" She pinned photos to her board: Keller shaking Alden's hand at a fundraiser, the leveled land, a simple cash flow chart linking the fund to political groups. Everything was clear. The only question, who would allow it to be seen? At 3 a.m, an anonymous message hit her encrypted inbox. "Not everyone wants the past dug up, especially when it's still alive." No period, no signature. She understood she had exposed a living power ecosystem. Across town, Eleanor received the same message. She folded her phone without replying. The office was quiet. The window cracked open. The breeze was mild, but she knew what lay ahead would not be. Less than 2 days after the roster release, an undercurrent stirred in politics and media. Eleanor's office was bombarded with anonymous emails and veiled texts repeating one line: "Know where to stop." One email to her aide included a photo of her daughter's New York apartment and the words, "Some things should be left alone." Committee members felt the squeeze too. An independent journalist, Blast, wrote Reply Blast to Flower Girl citing mental health. A community representative was told their last 3 years of taxes would be audited. No one publicly resigned, but a cloud of doubt settled over the reform effort. In an emergency meeting on the Justice Department's 3rd floor, Eleanor faced 6 colleagues / 1 seat empty. Her voice was calm, yet firm. "We're under pressure, and they expect us to crumble within 30 days. She offered no lofty rhetoric, only a question. If we can't last 3 months, who will stand for those pushed out of their homes in 3 days? The heavy nods that followed outweighed any formal pledge. Meanwhile, in another Ridgepoint district, Keller remained uncharged. Suspended but still connected, he assured former colleagues in a leaked recording, "That committee won't last a month. Trust me, no one has the guts to hold a knife without fearing blood." Reviewing the legal advisor lineup for anti-committee forces, Micah spotted a familiar name, George Delaney, counsel to Ridgepoint Police when Keller signed a string of contested seizures. The confrontation now clearly spanned far beyond the precinct. Tasha struck back with her pen. The power network behind the Handcuffs appeared simultaneously in an independent news site, a political blog, and a popular podcast. It mapped cash flows, displayed financial diagrams, showed Keller and Alden at a fundraiser, and tied 4 seizure projects to the Order and Development Fund. The media shockwave forced the state DOJ into a snap press conference. A spokesperson confirmed a parallel probe into unusual financial links between political groups and the Ridgepoint Police Department. That evening, Eleanor stood alone in her office. No rain fell, yet the city felt hushed. She stared out the window, one hand resting on folders of seizure victims, some no longer living. Their names and addresses still lay within, and she would call each one into the light. Jerome Carter had once worked in the records archive of the Ridgepoint Police Department. Few people paid him much attention. A black man in his 30s, quiet, diligent, and never a source of trouble. Yet that very silence let Jerome witness many things others missed: files that vanished overnight, lines corrected in red ink, enforcement orders lacking proper signatures that were still carried out before being reassigned to the logistics room. He quietly backed up numerous originals onto a separate hard drive and locked it in his personal safe. When the investigative committee was formed, Jerome was the first to volunteer to testify. In an email to Eleanor Graves, he wrote plainly, "I do not want to live in a city where the truth is treated as a threat. If you need evidence, I have it." The night before the hearing, Jerome texted Tasha Monroe 3 words, "See you tomorrow." But the next morning, no one saw him arrive. His phone was off. Emails went unanswered. The committee clerk informed Eleanor that Jerome had not appeared and no one could reach him. Another member called his boarding house. The landlord said, "He was still here last night. His motorbike is in the lot. I think he went out on foot." Jerome's apartment was locked from the inside, with no sign of forced entry. Dinner lay half-eaten on the table. Eleanor, her expression unchanging, immediately ordered the hearing paused, citing witness personnel adjustments. At the same time, she instructed Tasha, "Find him before someone else does." Tasha began with the few traces left. Hallway cameras at the boarding house showed Jerome leaving close to midnight. He wore a black jacket, hood up, carrying a backpack. His stride was hurried. A traffic camera 2 blocks away caught him crossing the street, turning into an alley near downtown. After that, nothing. No further trace. When she filed an official missing person request with the police department, the reply made her clench her fists. An adult citizen may change residence at will and is not required to report. No missing person record. No investigation. Online, news about Jerome trickled out, mainly from Tasha's earlier articles on whistleblowers who had been threatened. Some shared a short clip of Jerome speaking at a community hearing where he said, "Files can be erased, papers forged, but you cannot erase the memories of the living." Public opinion split sharply. One side believed Jerome had been forced into silence. Followers of the Keller case called it a familiar tactic to cut loose ends. The other side retorted, "Only the guilty fear a hearing. Maybe he's scared of prosecution." A few comments sneered, "Every time there's a committee, someone disappears. How convenient." Senator Alden, who had once denied the committee's investigative authority, appeared on television, coolly stating, "If a witness lacks the courage to face justice, we should re-examine the credibility of all testimony." The remark struck like a blade at the efforts of Eleanor and her colleagues, amplified by right-wing media as proof that the committee was staging a narrative. By day's end, Tasha received an anonymous email sent from a masked address, no subject. The body contained only one line. Carter had Keller at his doorstep last month. Keller said, "You can stay silent or disappear. Choose." Attached was a photo of Jerome's front door, a man in plain clothes standing beside a pickup truck parked at the curb. In his hand was a small box resembling a voice recorder. Tasha studied the image for a long time. Then she pulled her chair closer and opened her unfinished investigation file. In the dim desk lamp glow, her face tightened. This fight was no longer in the hearing room, but in a harsher arena between faith and fear. The next morning, Tasha went to the last address Jerome had mentioned in an old message. The apartment of Marla Green, his former girlfriend of 2 years. Marla opened the door, eyes ringed with fatigue. She did not know where Jerome was, but confirmed one thing. He had been afraid for weeks. 3 nights in a row that month, a police car parked outside her house, no one exited, and no notice was given. Jerome lost sleep, spoke little, yet the last time he left a note in a notebook, "If anything happens, don't trust the department's report, call Tasha Monroe." Tasha photographed the page, a blue ink line, smudged, slanting left. It had not been written as evidence. It was a message meant for survival. From there, Tasha traced another name, Daniel Nguyen, a technician who once worked with Jerome in the archive. Daniel now handled data maintenance at a small software firm on the south side. Hearing Jerome's name, his voice lowered. "I know he had something important. Once he asked me to hold a USB, then took it back the same day." When Tasha pressed further, Daniel hesitated, then agreed to meet in the rear parking lot of a supermarket, the spot with the fewest cameras. But before the meeting time, Daniel's social media accounts vanished. Profile images turned blank, old posts were wiped, and his phone was unreachable. Tasha froze. This was no single disappearance. It was an invisible campaign clearing the path, step by step, erasing everyone who could prove the truth. At the committee's internal session that morning, Eleanor proposed publicizing Jerome's disappearance. A conservative member immediately objected. "If we announce without clear evidence, the public will think we're fabricating." Others wavered, fearing unverified information would shatter already fragile trust in the investigation. Eleanor stood, her words deliberate. "When someone brave enough to speak vanishes, and we choose silence, how are we any different from them?" The room fell dead silent. That afternoon, Eleanor held a separate press briefing, bypassing the committee. She did not mention Keller, did not name Jerome. She said only, "Some voices are deemed dangerous because they come from courage, and if that courage is traded for silence, our voices must sound twice as loud." The quote became a media highlight. Independent journalists, bloggers, and activists shared it widely. The hashtag Jerome Carter appeared, then climbed to the top. A spontaneous search swept across the city. People flocked to old boarding houses, warehouses, and bus depots, looking for any sign. That evening, Tasha received another anonymous email. This time, it was not text or a photo. It was a short video, silent. The frame showed a gray brick wall. Below it, a torn piece of paper. Scrawled across in hurried handwriting, "I am still here, but someone is watching my every step." No location given, nothing else. Yet that single line told Tasha enough. Jerome was alive, and what he held could decide the fate of the entire system. Rumors rarely need proof, only timing, and this Tim E. Ron Keller chose the perfect moment to strike. Monday morning, Eleanor Graves was slated to address a community forum at the Northeastern Civil Rights Institute, where erstwhile supporters were edging back. She planned a brief speech, not to defend herself, but to rekindle trust in the system she had served. Yet Micah's phone erupted as their car arrived. Dozens of alerts claiming Graves suppressed evidence in the 2010 Brockwell police case, each linking to an article spreading like wildfire. Arbiter of justice or ally of injustice? Micah burst into the meeting room, laptop open. On screen, a declassified file stamped by the Ridgepoint Judicial Archive. Headline: Graves withheld physical evidence from the jury, leading to Officer Brockwell's acquittal after lethal force against a black youth. Eyes red, he growled, "They planned this." Eleanor took the file, reading in silence. The room froze. Local TV paired her image with Brockwell's old mugshot. broadcasting a grainy audio clip. "I do not find that document decisive." Stripped of context, the quote sparked public doubt. Tasha Monroe texted, "Spliced clip on air. Major papers ran it unchecked. Likely Keller. He threatened me 2 days ago." Micah shouted, "Fabricating a 15-year-old case. We have to hit back now." Eleanor closed the file calmly. "React like they do and we become them. Stay silent and you lose everything," Micah insisted. "I lose face, not justice," she replied. Outside, supporters waved signs, but interlopers brandished placards. "Two-faced judge. Never forget," while cameras awaited a misstep. Eleanor stepped out, no script. Micah shielding her from reporters. At the mic, her gaze was steady. "No verdict is perfect, but I have never traded truth for reputation. As for 2010, if I were truly guilty, no one would need to invent anything." Applause was mixed, yet one person in the back raised a hand-painted sign, "We still believe." For 3 hours, Micah pored over metadata. Opinion remained split. If they couldn't debunk the file, her name was doomed. Tasha arrived with a USB, original from the Federal Archive, all utterable without a court order. Micah trembled as he opened it. No hint Eleanor hid evidence. Last modified in 2017, 7 years post-trial. "The copy was edited," he whispered, "by a Ridgepoint PD tech, Keller's former subordinate." Tasha confirmed. "Release it now," Micah urged. "Media chose their angle," she warned. "The scandal headline spreads faster than the truth. Then we bypass media. We use the courts." He phoned a colleague at the Federal District Court. A day later, they certified the original, cleared Eleanor. Still, the smear stuck. #evidence suppressed trended despite being debunked. In a closed briefing, Micah concluded, "We proved you innocent. The public may not care." Eleanor stared at a photo of her mother, injured fighting an unlawful eviction in the 70s. "They called her a troublemaker, never giving her a chance to clear her name," she murmured. "What now?" Micah asked. "We continue," Eleanor said. "Not to protect my name, but to protect those who will stand here after me." Tasha exhaled. "You know they won't stop." Eleanor nodded. "They don't need to. Every blow to my honor forces them to face the truth." Night draped Ridgepoint like a sealed box. No car horns, no sweeping headlights, only wind rattling the window panes beneath a motionless, silver-gray sky. Eleanor Graves sat alone in her 6th-floor apartment, the home she had kept for nearly 20 years. The living room was tidy, stripped of excess ornament, everything in its place, exactly like the life she had chosen, orderly, unscarred, discreet. She slipped on a light robe, poured a cup of chamomile tea, set it on the table, and then lowered herself into the single chair by the window. Outside, a jaundiced street lamp glimmered on the parked cars. A middle-aged woman pushed a shopping cart past, silent. A weary ghost in a mute city. She had barely closed her eyes when the landline rang. An intrusive, persistent buzz in the hush. Eleanor opened her eyes but did not rush. At the 6th ring, she reached for the receiver. "Graves, speaking." The voice offered no name, no clear accent. Hoarse, slightly warped as if filtered through software. "You don't know who you're up against," it said, slow and precise. "Stop, dig any deeper, and next time it won't be just handcuffs." The line went dead, no click, only sudden silence, as though someone had unplugged the world. Eleanor kept the receiver in her hand, frozen. The final words bored into her like a blunt knife. "Next time it won't be just handcuffs." Only when the wall clock struck midnight did she hang up. Her tea had gone cold, leaving a pale ring on the glass table. She rose and walked to the bedroom. Each step weighted with hesitation. From the bedside drawer, she drew an old envelope containing a photograph of her mother, taken in 1976, a black woman in a brown dress, chin lifted amid bulldozed tenements. She had been arrested for resisting an illegal eviction. Police broke her ribs. No one was ever investigated. Eleanor sat on the bed, staring at that face. More than 40 years had passed, yet fear had not changed shape. It had merely adopted new titles, new uniforms. That same fear now hid behind a disguised voice, blunt language aimed at a woman trying to keep her spine straight. She let out a dry laugh, born not of bravery but of realizing her own smallness inside a machine she thought she understood. Maybe I should quit, the thought crept in. If I stop, perhaps Micah won't be followed, Lopez won't be reassigned, Tasha won't get more threats. She clenched the photo, unaware she was crying. Then, by reflex, she shook her head. No, if I give up over one anonymous call, I might as well have bowed my head the day they cuffed me in the street. But she slipped the photo back into its envelope, stood, and poured a fresh cup of tea. Her eyes no longer trembled. They held only silent readiness for reprisal. Dawn's first light spilled through the window, spreading over the gray-white wall. She had been awake all night. Wind hissed through the frame. The clock ticked, a reminder that time waits for no one, not even the threatened. In her stud Yi, she set the cooled tea beside the lapped, still glowing from the night before. On the screen was a list of names she had placed under internal review. Mostly police officers, regional inspectors, and 3 heads of the local security fund board. She had kept the list secret throughout the Keller case. Not from fear, but because once those names surfaced, there would be no way back. She pressed a key. A prompt appeared. Are you sure you want to share these files? She glanced at a tilted photo frame on the desk, her mother before a crumbling wall, clutching a rejected petition for justice. No anger on that face, only unspoken conviction. Eleanor nodded and confirmed. She called Micah, her voice low and steady. Prepare all the files. Tomorrow, we reveal everyone behind Keller. There was a pause. Are you sure this isn't an investigation anymore? It's a confrontation. Exactly, Eleanor replied. I won't ask you to risk everything, but if I stop now, the day they cuffed me would already be the end, and I refuse to live in that ending. Then we go all the way. Micah exhaled. Tasha Monroe received a message from Eleanor with one note. If I lose my chance to speak, bring everything into the light. Tasha called back, voice breaking. You're not going anywhere, but if something happens, don't worry. The whole city will know who they are. Eleanor smiled, not with confidence, but with relief, like someone who accepts the inevitable yet chooses to move forward. She printed the unpublished investigative files, stacked them thick, and labeled them in red. Top secret, auto-remade if not acknowledged within 48 hours. Copies went to 3 places: the federal court, an independent newsroom, and a human rights legal team supporting her. She was preparing not only for exposure but for retaliation, and this time she was not alone. Before leaving the study, Eleanor looked once more at the screen. Upload successful, 14 documents secured. She whispered, if they want silence through threats, they should remember I was born to the crack of whips, not the wail of sirens. Then she stepped out, carrying determination as cold as steel and as silent as justice yet to be named. The morning in the 3rd-floor conference room of the Ridgepoint Human Rights Center was quiet. No big cameras, no stage. Just a few plastic chairs set against the wall, a long wooden table with a single lie microphone and a running recorder. Eleanor Graves walked in carrying an old leather box, with no secretary, no security detail. Tasha Monroe nodded in greeting. Micah Sanders was already there, holding a stack of files. Little was said. They all understood that today was no press conference. It was a detonation. Eleanor sat at the center of the table and set the box before her. She did not begin at once. Her gaze swept across the room. 5 independent journalists, a representative from a judicial watch organization, and a lawyer from the Civil Rights Alliance. In 30 years on the bench, Eleanor began, her voice low, I believed the system could be reformed from within, but some truths, unless brought into the light, remain forever a darkness beneath verdicts pre-written. She opened the box. Inside lay a dark brown, leather-bound notebook, edges worn, one corner scarred. Eleanor lifted it with both hands, as though it weighed more than its pages, placed it before the microphone, and opened to the first page. 32 cases absent from official records, handwritten notes, cross-checked evidence, and the names of those who may have, or already did, distort justice by power. A chill swept the room. No one spoke. Eleanor turned the first page and pointed to one entry. Case R. Harrison, Ridge Point South, 2009. The teenager suffered a broken jaw in detention. Internal report: fell and hit the wall while running. Female witness, reassigned to another unit 1 week later. Micah bowed his head, exhaling hard. He had tried to investigate that case fresh out of law school, finding nothing for lack of police confirmation. Eleanor turned another page, this one inked in red. Judge Cooper refused to accept grievance filing for insufficient legal basis. Victim later committed suicide. The room stayed silent. No one pulled out a phone. No one rushed to craft a headline. This was not the moment for first lines. A young reporter rose, trembling. "Judge Graves, why reveal this only now?" Eleanor looked straight at him, neither sharp nor defensive, merely an icy frankness. "Because I once thought I could turn the system from within. I was wrong." A human rights representative pressed. "For the individuals you name, do you have supporting proof?" Micah stood to answer. "We triple-checked independently. Every case has involved parties, recordings, or details matching suppressed internal files. We are ready for confrontation." Eleanor closed the notebook, her hand still on the cover. "I am not publishing this to take revenge. I publish because I have seen too much. Each page is a person who has lost their voice, and I can no longer carry them as my private testament." Outside the window, the sun was high, yet its light barely entered the room, heavy with the names of those once deemed untouchable. 3 hours after Eleanor unveiled the notebook, copies had reached 3 places: the Congressional Investigations Committee office, the 7th Circuit Federal Court, and the Human Rights Lawyers Alliance. At the same time, Tasha Monroe released a summary of the first 5 pages on her independent site under the headline, "Graves, 32 Suppressed Cases." Names include judges, police chiefs, and prosecutor. The internet exploded. In under 2 hours, the hashtag #TheReal spread across social platforms. A clip of Eleanor recounting the teenage jawbreak case drew over 500,000 TikTok views in 15 minutes. Civil rights groups went live, streaming the entire session with the caption, "Who really commands justice in Ridgepoint?" That very day, the federal court announced it would consider a special hearing request based on Eleanor's preliminary evidence, faster than anything Micah had braced for. Yet, as with any public expose, the system struck back just as fiercely. 3 hours after the post, Judge Braden Cooper, named by Eleanor, held a press event. Face set like stone, he declared, "I am the target of an organized smear. If Judge Graves retains any honor, she should know these accusations are politically motivated. I will sue her for defamation." Mainstream outlets, Channel 6, Ridgepoint Herald, echoed his words with banners. "Storm after Graves' list, legal system in turmoil." Micah watched the developments on his phone. Comment threads were shifting. If she had this notebook for years, why reveal it only now? A judge keeping secrets? No different from complicity. I want to believe, but it sounds like a conspiracy theory. Not everyone turned away, yet doubt had taken root. That evening, Eleanor came home without turning on the lights. She sat, holding an old slip titled Emergency List, a miniaturized copy of the notebook she had kept for years as insurance. Carefully, she marked each case by the level of public response. Some names were being dredged up by reporters, some had appeared in past protests, others remained silent, still in power. Micah called, weary. "Braden is suing for real. They're gathering signatures within the Judges' Council. They say you're no longer neutral." Eleanor breathed softly. "I was never neutral. I only believed silence was the right thing." Tasha messaged, "You need to respond publicly. Counter before they seize the media narrative." Eleanor refused. "Not now. If I answer every charge with words, they'll use my silence to speak for me." Outside, a group protested against her before the Human Rights Center. But next to the M, another group raised a banner, "If she is lying, why are our names in her notebook?" The battle was no longer between Eleanor and Keller. It was between Eleanor and a network that knew how to survive in darkness by bending the light of truth. Before bed, she wrote one more line in her journal. I stayed silent to protect a system that never meant to protect me. Today I choose truth and accept every consequence. Her phone vibrated. An unlisted text. Your notebook will be the reason others die. Eleanor stared at the words for a long time, then deleted the message without replying. Tomorrow, Eleanor Graves will walk into a hearing unlike any she's attended in her 3-decade career. This time, she won't be the judge with a gavel enforcing courtroom order. She'll be the one carrying the fire, and possibly the first to be burned by it. Ridgepoint is engulfed in a media storm. Major news outlets have descended as if this small city were about to become the epicenter of America. Reporters line the sidewalks outside federal buildings. Satellite vans clog intersections. Every headline echoes the same name, Eleanor Graves, the judge who dared to expose the system that raised her. National broadcasts replay footage of her public release of the notebook, paired with polarizing commentary and back-to-back panel debates. Some politicians call for a postponement of the hearing to verify evidence, but everyone watching knows it's a procedural tactic, one last maneuver to stall a process that can no longer be undone. Within the justice system itself, the ripple effect is tangible. A rumor spreads quickly through courtrooms and law offices. At least 3 individuals listed in Eleanor's notebook have quietly resigned in the past 48 hours. No press releases, no exit interviews, just abrupt departures. Vanishing acts, as if trying to erase their tracks before the spotlight lands. That evening, in the stillness of her 6th-floor apartment, Eleanor invites Micah Sanders and Officer Lopez to join her. The space remains unchanged. Modest, uncluttered, personal in its restraint. A wooden dining table stands at the center of the living room, set with 3 plates of untouched food and a teapot whose steam continues to rise, though no one has poured a cup. They sit without preamble, without the need for ceremony. There's no casual chatter, only the kind of silence that exists when truth sits between people, waiting to be acknowledged. Micah opens his laptop, his voice steady as he spreads out several documents across the table. We need to align our key points before facing the committee. First, corroboration between the notebook and independent archival records. Tasha's double-checking everything tonight. Second, proof of document tampering. 3 files were directly altered by Keller's people. The metadata shows modifications made years after the original timestamps. Third, we identify 3 high-ranking officials who blocked internal investigations. One of them will be on the review board tomorrow. Eleanor listens but doesn't write anything down. She leans back slightly, eyes on Micah, studying him, not as a colleague, but as someone whose conviction may one day outlast her own. Across from her, Lopez folds her hands in her lap, shoulders tense, her silence saying more than words. Eleanor tilts her head slightly and asks, Lopez, if I'm arrested tomorrow, are you ready to keep going? The answer is immediate, unwavering. Yes, I won't let it stop here. A brief pause, then Lopez adds, her voice slower but firmer, my mother worked as a social aide in Westhale. She got death threats after exposing an abuse case, but she still spoke out. I don't want the next generation to inherit silence. Eleanor nods, not with approval but understanding. She asks nothing further. That wasn't just a statement of support, it was the purpose. Something solid enough to walk into fire with. Outside the window, city lights blur behind the film of night fog. The tea grows cold. No one touches their plate. What they are building here doesn't need heat. It burns already. The apartment remains still. Through the glass, street lights flicker, bending with the wind. No one moves. No one checks a phone or a clock. In the golden haze of a dim floor lamp, Eleanor, Micah, and Lopez sit like 3 sentinels at the edge of a battlefield, knowing they may not all return intact, spiritually, politically, or physically. Micah glances at his watch. It's not quite midnight, but all 3 of them feel the same thing. This is the hour when truth is no longer something you discover. It's something you choose to say. Are you afraid? He asks Eleanor. his voice low. It's not an idle question. It's the kind of people who only ask when the door is about to open on something irreversible. Eleanor takes a sip from her cup, now lukewarm. Her eyes settle on the USB sitting in the center of the table like a live wire. I'm not afraid of dying, she replies calmly. I'm only afraid of one thing, that Ron will survive, dressed in new clothes, under a different name. Micah says nothing, but he knows. He's watched administrations change, reforms declared and policies rewritten, and yet the machinery underneath remains untouched, designed to protect those already protected and crush those without names or titles beneath the weight of lawful cruelty. Lopez speaks, her voice softer now. When I got home tonight, I saw my mom packing up a box of old clothes. I asked what she was doing. She said, just in case my daughter doesn't come home. She tries to smile, but it falters. She always knows, even when I say nothing. Eleanor doesn't respond right away. She sits still, overcome not by surprise but by something deeper, recognition. That fear is not foreign. It mirrors her own mother's words decades ago. Black women have always known what's coming, and yet they keep walking forward. Eleanor leans forward and nudges the USB across the table toward Micah. This has the recording of my call with a state prosecutor. He confirmed he was told to shut down any investigation that might touch Keller. Micah furrows his brow. Why are you giving this to me now? Eleanor's voice is clear. Because I wanted to believe he might still do the right thing, but if I disappear, you release it. The air seems to thicken further, dense enough that even a breath feels loud. Lopez reaches into her coat and pulls out a slim voice recorder. I've got a backup copy too, in case we're split up. They're not going to let all three of us speak tomorrow. Eleanor looks at her, and for the first time in days, there's a smile. Not guarded, not cynical, but genuine. You've both already gone farther than I ever did, she says. Tomorrow, we're not there to ask for mercy. We're there to show that the truth didn't die quiet. Outside, the city hasn't gone to sleep. Sirens echo faintly in the distance, but in that apartment, surrounded by old notebooks, cold tea, and data that could break a system, a new chapter is already being written. There will be no turning back. And that morning, the federal capitol overflowed with people. Beneath the soaring white dome, the marble echoed not with noise, but with silence, a silence so dense it seemed to press against the walls. Hundreds of eyes followed the woman in a black coat, hair pulled into a tight, exacting bun, as she ascended the witness podium. Eleanor Graves did not rush. Each step, measured and deliberate, felt like a tribute to those who would never take a step in this chamber, whose names had never been read into public record, whose pain had never reached the ears of those in power. The hearing chamber was absolutely still. No coughs, no shifting, not even the buzz of impatient whispers. Media access had been severely restricted, with only a few front-facing cameras permitted. Yet outside, social networks held their collective breath. The official live stream, hosted by the Oversight Subcommittee, drew hundreds of thousands of viewers within minutes. The screen ticker read in sharp white letters against a red bar, Eleanor Graves' testimony begins. The presiding chair delivered a brief, protocol-laden introduction, then turned toward her. Judge Graves, you may proceed. Eleanor did not look at him. She did not look into the cameras. Her eyes moved slowly across the hall, pausing not on power but on the back rows, on the faces dark with exhaustion, brown with labor, lined by decades, stained with grief. And then she began. Thank you for giving me this chance, but allow me not to spend it on myself. From the inside of her coat, she drew out a small, faded notebook. Not the explosive ledger that had shaken institutions, but something older, worn at the edges. I'm not here to talk about being handcuffed on a public street. I'm here for the people who had no camera pointed at them, no hashtags, no headlines, no hearings. A heavier silence fell. She opened the notebook and read, her voice steady. Henry Collins, 38. Beaten to death in custody after allegedly resisting a search. His wife filed 3 complaints. None were acknowledged. She turned a page. Ariana Liu, 14. Misidentified by facial recognition software. Detained for 6 days. She lost her full scholarship. There was no formal apology. Another page. Darnell Fields, 19, stopped while jogging. No documents on him, no resistance. Handcuffed, shoved, and shoulder broken. Case marked non-serious and closed without review. She closed the notebook and held it in both hands. I once believed these were rare errors, aberrations. I told myself, the system exists, let it work. Be patient. But the system wasn't designed to protect everyone. It was designed to determine who gets believed and who gets forgotten. From the panel, a commissioner leaned toward his microphone. "Judge Graves, please address matters about yourself." Eleanor turned slowly to face him. "I am irrelevant. I am alive. Hundreds are not. If I speak only of myself, then these pages, these names, are silenced all over again." She paused. "What connects Henry, Ariana, and Darnell? No live stream, no camera, and no one thought they deserved to be remembered." The chamber didn't move. The hush wasn't from disinterest. It was the weight of reckoning. These names were not abstractions. They had now been entered, out loud, into the record, inside the walls that for too long had protected only the powerful. "I know some will accuse me of making this emotional," she said, "that I'm trying to manipulate with story, but truth needs no decoration, it simply needs space to exist." From her coat pocket, she pulled a plain black USB drive, handed it to the clerk. "This contains my conversation with Prosecutor Walter Delaney, who oversaw internal inquiries into Officer Keller's conduct." There was a ripple of sound, a collective intake of breath. The chair nodded, and the recording was played aloud through the chamber's speakers. Delaney's voice was unmistakable. "Eleanor, if you push this further, you need to stop now." The order to freeze the Keller probe came from above, Senator Brown's office. The instruction was, maintain the department's image. Anyone who breaks ranks will be marginalized. Eleanor's voice on the tape. "And you stayed silent?" Delaney, "I didn't have a choice. Do you?" The clip ended. For a long second, the room was void of movement. Those who came expecting to question her had instead received evidence. The air had shifted. Eleanor turned back to the commissioners. Power is meant to protect. When it chooses instead to conceal harm, it becomes a tool of violence. Toward the back, an elderly woman began to cry, her hands clutching a worn photograph of a young man, one of the names Eleanor had read. No camera moved to capture her grief, but everyone in the room saw it. "I was taught that truth takes time," Eleanor said. "But the dead do not have time. Parents who have lost their children do not have time. People whose skin has made them suspect do not have time to wait for justice to become convenient." A voice from the panel asked, "Then what is your objective today? What do you want this system to do?" She answered without hesitation, "I'm not here to win a hearing. I'm here to say that justice cannot be conditional. It cannot serve only the powerful. It must serve everyone, or it serves no one." She took a breath, deeper than before. "I have nothing left to protect. My reputation, my position, political favor. I've given them up. What I still have is one thing: faith. Faith that if we dare speak wrong aloud today, tomorrow might begin to change." She nodded once and stepped away from the podium. She did not bow, she did not look back, but the entire hall stood, not to clap, not to cheer, but simply to bear witness, because the truth had been spoken, and this time, no one would be able to say they hadn't heard it. The trial of Ron Keller unfolded in the marble-walled district court, yet from the first flicker of dawn, it was clear that this proceeding had grown far beyond a local case file. Satellite vans formed a jagged barricade outside. Journalists pressed shoulder to shoulder, locking down spots hours before the doors opened. By 7 o'clock, the plaza buzzed with the whir of camera lenses and the dull roar of commentators broadcasting live updates. Overhead, giant screens on passing news trucks looped the same haunting footage. Eleanor Graves in flawless white, wrists pinioned behind her back beside a gleaming Bentley, her eyes lifted, dignity unbroken. Anchors posed the question that now echoed across the nation. How could such an outrage unfold in broad daylight without anyone stepping in? Inside, Keller faced 3 felony counts: abuse of authority, falsified arrest documentation, and violation of civil rights. The prosecution's presentation was methodical. each exhibit tightening the vise. Grainy internal camera stills showed Keller diverting paperwork for special handling. Email chains revealed supervisors nudged into silence with veiled threats of reassignment. Finally, a damning phone recording crackled through the courtroom speakers. Keller, 2 years earlier, boasting, "As long as the paperwork looks right, they'll swallow it." Gasps rippled through the gallery. That single line crystallized the corrosion of a system propped up by forged narratives. As the indictment widened, past incidents clawed their way back to daylight. 7 prior arrests, all smeared by procedural shortcuts, were reopened, each name another weight on the scales. Jurors sat stone still, pens frozen, as a teen's battered booking photo appeared on the projector. The caption read, "Injury attributed to accidental fall." No cross-examination could bleach away the bruises. That same morning, in a separate wing of the courthouse, Isabel Lopez's badge and rank were formally reinstated. She entered the press room with her uniform razor-creased, bun pinned high, and a single handwritten note. Lights flashed, microphones extended like skeletal hands. She spoke evenly. "I believed silence would shield me, but silence saved no one. From today, I will act, no matter the cost." The declaration, recorded by dozens of feeds, surged through academy classrooms within hours, hailed as the manifesto of a generation unwilling to obey blindly. While Keller's future tightened around him, a letter bearing the seal of the Federal Judicial Council traveled by courier to a modest townhouse on Hawthorne Street. It entreated Eleanor Graves to resume her seat on the bench, concluding with, "The nation needs your voice." 2 days passed. Reporters camped outside wondered if she would emerge in robes once more. A courier returned to Washington with a small ivory envelope. Inside, in Eleanor's measured script, stood a single sentence: "I cannot trust a chair that once turned its back in silence." News outlets seized on every image from the trial. One shot dominated the evening broadcasts. Keller, shoulders hunched, head bowed under the courtroom lights. An officer accustomed to towering over others now dwarfed by the weight of sworn testimony. Miles away, in the warren of corridors at Ridgepoint Police Headquarters, a quiet ritual unfolded. Young officers, fresh academy graduates, unscrewed the brushed steel nameplate reading Chief Ron Keller from the honor wall. They left the rectangle bare until someone produced a black and white photo, Eleanor standing in cuffs, eyes steady. They mounted it in silence. The gesture was unofficial, yet everyone present understood its verdict. Across town, Micah Sanders rented an aging community library for an unadvertised gathering. No sponsor banners, no security detail, just folding chairs and the smell of old paper. A burlap sign read, "Graves Legal Watch," a nonprofit pledged to defend citizens who lack the means or platform to defend themselves. On a central table lay dog-eared case files, brown folders stamped "closed" for lack of evidence. Micah's voice, when he addressed the 36 attendees, cut through the stillness. "Belief is never granted at birth. Some of us are born to wrest it back, on behalf of others." The applause that followed was not thunderous, yet its conviction filled the room. Eleanor's final public appearance came via satellite on a national evening program. Studio lights glimmered off the host's polished desk. Eleanor's face appeared on the split screen, thinner now, lines at the eyes deeper, yet her gaze unaltered. The interviewer leaned forward, delivering the inquiry every viewer mouthed at home. "Judge Graves, do you consider yourself victorious?" Eleanor's reply landed like a gavel. "No, I did not win. I simply refused to kneel." Within an hour, the quote blanketed social media. Activists silk-screened it onto placards outside precincts from Seattle to Savannah. A law school convened an emergency symposium titled "Refusing to Kneel Before Blind Power." High school civics teachers downloaded lesson plans on the precedent of Graves v. Silence. In Ridgepoint, a group of black students drafted an apology to Eleanor. They confessed that in the original phone clip, they had laughed, unaware of her identity. The letter closed. "We understand now. Courage speaks louder than titles." Overnight, their message circulated in classrooms. Teachers pinned it to bulletin boards under the heading, "Accountability." Behind the glare of headlines, an almost invisible story unfolded. From county detention, Keller penned a letter, not to Eleanor or the press, but to his estranged wife and teen loved ones who had slipped away during his ascent. The paper bore smudged ink. "I bent the law until it bent me. If I could step back, I'd stop while someone still looked me in the eyes and saw the truth." The note leaked to media blog. Comment sections brimmed with scorn, yet no one demanded further punishment. Ignominy had finished the work. After that, Eleanor retreated. She relocated to a quiet Midwestern town, a few blocks from the red brick library where she first pored over constitutional law at 18. Locals knew her simply as Miss Eleanor. Each dawn, she strolled the park with her aging terrier, exchanging greetings with the newspaper vendor, slipping coins into the honor box. One crisp autumn afternoon, a black girl in a plaid uniform sprinted from a playground, clutching a history worksheet covered in highlighter marks. "I know who you are," she announced, eyes bright. Startled, Eleanor knelt to meet her gaze. "Do you think I won?" The girl pondered, shook her head. "No, ma'am, but because of you, people are scared to be wrong again." And so the story closes not in fanfare, but in the restoration of true silence. No longer wielded as a cover, only as respite. The system did not transform overnight. Documents still wait in dusty archives. Struggles still simmer. Yet now, whenever a pair of handcuffs snaps shut, a ripple of memory crosses the conscience of those who wield them. The image of a woman who once chose silence, not from fear, but from strategic resolve, until a nation had no choice but to listen. The story of Eleanor Graves is not merely about a wrongful arrest. It is a powerful testament to how a system can treat someone with cruelty not because they did something wrong, but because their identity wasn't immediately recognized in a critical moment. The pressing question is, if Eleanor hadn't been a federal judge, would anyone have stepped in to defend her? Could that black woman, stripped of status and voice, have escaped a social sentence she never deserved? From this, 3 vital lessons emerge. 1. Don't rush to judge others based on prejudice. When Officer Keller confronted Eleanor in public, what he saw was not a potential crime, but the image of a black woman standing next to an expensive car. That visual alone seemed unjustifiable to him. This was not about legal suspicion. It was about a worldview shaped by bias. Society often teaches us to judge based on skin color, accent, clothing, or zip code. But every human being deserves respect until proven otherwise, not the other way around. 2. A person's worth cannot be dismissed. Eleanor had presided over countless cases, defended the vulnerable, and spoken up for justice. Yet, the moment she chose silence, the system dismissed her as nobody. Titles and achievements may fade in the face of ignorance, but dignity, intellect, and composure remain unshakable. She didn't need to declare her rank. The truth revealed itself through her resolve. 3. Justice always finds a way. There were moments when it felt like Eleanor might disappear into the system, her story drowned in digital noise. But the efforts of people like Tasha Monroe and Lopez turned whispers into roars. Justice may not arrive on time, but when enough people resist, when truth finds its chorus, it becomes impossible to silence. From a personal story to a general reflection, this didn't just happen in Ridgepoint. It could happen anywhere, in any country where unchecked authority and unchallenged prejudice coexist. And the responsibility to prevent it doesn't lie only with courts or lawmakers. It lies with all of us. Whether you are a citizen, a journalist, a public defender, or just a student with a phone, your awareness and your voice matter. Eleanor chose silence, not out of fear, but to test how far a system would go when it doesn't recognize power in the person standing before it. That silence forced a nation to confront itself. Call to action. Have you ever been misjudged simply because someone didn't understand who you were? Have you ever been underestimated, only to prove them wrong through quiet strength? If the answer is yes, then you understand why this story isn't just about one woman. It speaks for millions who are dismissed, doubted, or denied because they don't look the part. Ask yourself, if you had seen Eleanor being cuffed that day, what would you have done? Walked away? Pulled out your phone and laughed, or stood up first? Don't let this story fade like so many others. Share it. Question it, talk about it. And if you have ever been in Eleanor's shoes, tell your story too. Every share, every post, every conversation brings us closer to a world where justice isn't based on appearance. If this story made you think, share it so others can reflect too. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire and challenge. Justice doesn't wear a badge or need a title. It lives in every act of courage, every honest question, and every refusal to bow to injustice.